Despite threatening skies in the heartland of central Ohio, a capacity crowd has filled National Trail Raceway outside Columbus for the 31st running of the Oldsmobile Springnationals. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Gary Gerald, and it's great to have you with us for the second of 3 NHRA drag racing events you're seeing this summer here on ABC Sports. In what is becoming a very familiar trend now in the qualifying rounds, we have again seen new performance records in all the pro categories that we're following at Columbus. Now, while it's the driver who gets the accolades and is in the spotlight for these great numbers that we're seeing, we know that it takes a tremendous effort on the part of his team to get him to that spot. It also takes a wealth of information to be successful in this very competitive sport. And for more on that angle, let's go to our broadcast colleague, Steve Evans.
Thanks, Gary. Folks, some of that information Gary was talking about comes from the onboard computer, but a lot of it is up here in the crew chief's head. For example, he knows this car doesn't like more than 4 runs on a set of tires. Doesn't matter what they look like, new rubber will go on this car. But the computer will tell him whether cylinder pressure was weak the previous round. If it was, nothing wakes up a tire motor like a new supercharger. Even the nitro comes into play in the fuel tank. Do you go up a percentage, down a percentage? What was the humidity? What was the heat the round before? What do we expect it to be the next round? And if you can't get enough information, what do? Well, here's Frank Hawley, 2-time Winston champ, with an angle on that.
You know, Steve, this is the information age. Now, you can imagine if every time your race car went down the racetrack, you had twice as much computer information to analyze. Well, maybe you'd learn things a little quicker. You ultimately might be a little faster a little sooner. Well, some of the racers do this in a very obvious fashion. They have a 2-car team, and of course the information passes freely from one team to the other. Others do it by a contractual relationship. Maybe the first team would lend a second team an engine for their car, and in return they get to look at the computer information from the second team's runs. Still others do it the old-fashioned way. They pass the information along just out of friendship. And Gary, I think we've seen examples of all of these this weekend.
Well, Frank, that first alternative that you talked about, the team concept, certainly readily evident by the long-standing contribution of the Coletta team. Scott Coletta is the defending series champion, the defending meet champion here at Columbus, and the fastest qualifier. Under the veteran eye of crew chief Dick LaHaye, Coletta was paired against Andy Woods in the opening round of competition. Scorched the quarter-mile strip at 4.827 seconds. A terrific time under the threatening conditions and at better than 301 miles per hour to put Woods on the trailer. The other half of the Coletta combo, Father Connie Coletta, been drag racing since the 1950s, was paired against Joe Amato in the first round. And Connie, at 4.992 seconds and better than 283 miles per hour, sidelined Amato. Now, one thing to keep in mind, the only way that father and son can meet today here in Columbus would be in the finals. They both have to advance through eliminations from opposite sides of the qualifying ladder. Now, to check the situation in funny car, let's go back to Steve.
Now, you wouldn't think that the winningest funny car driver in history, 4-time Winston champ John Force, would need an alliance with any other team. But he has one, and interestingly enough, with a real low-budget operation, the Creasy family and driver Gary Bolger. You see, Austin Coyle doesn't like to run brand-new clutch discs like this one. He gives them to Bolger, he makes one run, brings them back, and gets another load. And it was in round number 1, he seasoned some more clutches for Austin Coyle. He was in the far lane, up against Canadian rookie Jeff Arend, a tremendous performer in a school car from Paul Smith. Both lost traction, fighting for control. It was Bolger. At 5:45, only 265 miles per hour. That tire smoke just kills the speed. Now, what about John Force in round number 1? He was up against another buddy of his, another guy that can test those clutches for him, Gary Densham. Densham on the right-hand side of your screen or in the far lane. Force in the near lane. Force the number 1 qualifier. John fought the tricky racetrack, backpedaling the throttle to a 520, 283 miles an hour. So Force advances to round number 2, where he will meet head-on none other than Gary Bolger. A similar story exists in Pro Stock. Again, Frank Hawley.
There's an interesting relationship between this team, the Jim Yates Racing team, who happens to be the current leader in NHRA Pro Stock competition, and the Chuck Harris team. Harris is a newcomer to Pro Stock competition. Although both cars look quite different on the outside. The Harris car is an exact duplicate to the Yates machine, and both are tuned by the same guy, Yates crew chief Dick Maskin. Now, both drivers fared very well in the first round of competition. It only took 7.19 seconds for Yates to stop Larry Morgan, while in 7.18 seconds, Harris stopped Troy Coughlin's bid for a Spring Nationals title. Now, unfortunately, Harris and Yates meet each other in the second round of competition, and by virtue of that quicker run, Harris has lane charge.
Lee Beard, crew chief for Corey Mack.
We're really kind of expected to win, so it puts a lot of extra pressure on us to search. Even when you're on top, you can't give up. You got to work harder then, because eventually they're going to catch you.
Well, the hard work has paid off. McClenathan qualified second fastest. He qualified at 481, then slipped to 497 to beat Al Segrini in round number 1.
And Curry's opponent is a resurgent Eddie Hill. He won the Winter Nationals this year, qualified number 10 at 491, and more importantly, put out Larry Dixon, the world record holder, and number 2 at points in round 1. Corey McClenathan did indeed like that. Gave him a little breathing room. Here we go. Round 2 top fuel.
And a great opportunity for McClenathan if he can capitalize in advance.
Here the driver's staging. Eddie's in. Eddie Deek stages. Corey reacts to it and is gone. In football, you'd call that drawing the other team off sides. In drag racing, though, there's no penalty. All's fair. Hill wins it at 5:01.
So a disastrous second round for Corey McClenathan, the season points leader, as he is a victim to the deep late stage by Eddie Hill, and the red light eliminates him immediately from competition. And look at the reaction from Lee Beard, utter disbelief. Let's go to the far end now. Steve is with Eddie Hill.
Eddie Hill came out of the car laughing. He doesn't care about the elapsed time. He's moving on in the program. But tell me about flickering the lights up there. Was that intentional?
Well, would you believe I was having trouble with my brakes?
No, I would not.
You wouldn't? Well, if I can't tell you that, well, how about some waterfront property in Arizona?
I have a feeling it worked.
So Eddie Hill obviously enjoying the moment as he advances now, and McClenathan heads for the trailer. We get ready for our next pair. Mike Dunn will go up against Blaine Johnson. Johnson in the near lane, a runner-up in the finals of the last event at Richmond, Virginia, while his opponent Dunn is 4th in points. Steve now with Corey Mack.
Corey, we've seen it many times when the other driver just flickers those lights and it triggers something in your brain, maybe.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. You know, they flickered and I left, and driver error all the way. I got to apologize to Joe Gibbs and the guys. They've been doing a great job, and I know we can't win them all, but that was all my fault.
If this was easy, I'd do it.
So a great opportunity has been missed by Corey McClenathan. Now, Blaine Johnson's team has really made an impression in only their second year of Top Fuel competition. Here's Alan Johnson, the crew chief.
The only way to really be successful and win races is to try and be ahead of the other guy all the time. And if you're a follower, you're not going to win. You have to be out there and be an innovator.
Alan Johnson, considered a rising star in this most competitive sport. They've got quite a matchup right now as Johnson goes against Dunn. Johnson from Santa Maria, California. He qualified 4th at 483. Meanwhile, Mike Dunn qualified 5th at 485. He eliminated Jim Head in the opening round.
Well, Mike Dunn knows that the car in the other lane, Blaine Johnson, has tremendous power. Everybody envious of the Alan Johnson power. Once they harness that and get a few breaks, they'll be a winner. And they're already a winner here in the second round. As Mike Dunn, his crew chief, Frank Bradley, overpowered the racetrack. Blaine Johnson, a very calculated 491 at 293.
Meanwhile, in the funny car pits, they're adding fuel to the fastest car on the planet. Al Hoffman's national record holder coming up here later in the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals. We get the unique perspective from the helmet cam of Tommy Johnson as he backs into position in National Trail Raceways outside of Columbus, Ohio, ready for second round action here in Top Fuel. Mike Klober, a recent addition, a welcome addition to Johnson's team as he gets matched now against Connie Coletta.
That is Coletta's crew chief, Dave Settles. They qualified number 14 in a 16-car program at a 496. Ran a slower 499 to beat Tuamato in round 1, as we showed you earlier. Tommy Johnson Jr. is having the best race of the season so far. He qualified number 6. That's good for him at 486. A very nice 490 in round number 1 to put away the king of speed, Kenny Bernstein. Again, this camera is on Johnson's helmet. Tommy Johnson had the choice of lanes by being quicker the previous round. He's taken that near side. There's 0.4 of a second between the flash of yellow and green. That's why a perfect reaction time is .400.
From the view of the helmet of Tommy Johnson, the crew shows the elation of the victory as he advances at 4.96 seconds, 291 miles per hour, and he has put Connie Coletta on the sideline. But Scott Coletta is still alive, and under the tutelage of Dick LaHaye, a former championship driver, he's getting ready to meet Shelley Anderson. We talked to LaHaye about their extensive development program.
We've made over 45 test runs with this car this year. And Connie's car's made about 40 also. So we have learned a lot, and now we just got to put all the parts of the puzzle together.
Because of the huge expense, it's very unusual to have such an extensive developmental program in this sport. And that onboard view from the cockpit of Shelley Anderson, who will be going up against Scott Coletta. Meanwhile, Tommy Johnson with Steve.
TJ, this is by far the best outing you've had this season. What's turned it around, or is it turned around?
Well, it has turned around a bunch, Steve. You know, semis and cars running excellent. It didn't hurt any parts, and it's all we could ask for. The crew's doing a great job.
And a new crew chief didn't hurt either.
You know, we brought in another mind with Mike Klober, and both ideas together, and things are paying off real well. The guys are working hard.
So the hopes of the Coletta clan now ride in the cockpit of Scott Coletta, the #1 qualifier at 306 miles per hour. And remember, he topped the 300-mile-per-hour mark when he beat Andy Woods in round 1.
Shelley Anderson, hard to figure here. She qualified right in the middle of the pack, number 8 at 489, ran 491 in round number 1 to beat Pat Austin. And in many ways, this is a race between, of course, Shelley and Scott, but also Dick LaHaye and Shelley's crew chief, Ray Alley. Believe me, between round 6s, what is old crafty Ray going to do? And Ray's saying, boy, that LaHaye is good. What do I have to run to beat him? Scott Coletta streaks away from Shelley Anderson at a 4.84 second elapsed time for the standing quarter mile at almost 300 miles an hour. Shelley just underestimated the racetrack a bit at a 5:01.
Back and taking a look at the replay. Shelley on the far side of the screen gets the initial launch, but then you see raw fuel pouring out the left bank there. She's dropped a cylinder. That's costing her somewhere around 600 horsepower, and Coletta immediately takes advantage as he powers by. And another run at nearly 300 miles per hour for Scott Coletta. Now the final 4 pairings. Eddie Hill will go against Tommy Johnson. Johnson has the lane choice, his 496 beating the 501 of Eddie Hill. Blaine Johnson goes against Scott Coletta. Coletta has lane choice of 484 against a 491. Steve is now with Scott.
Scott, I'm sure you're keeping score. With Dixon out, with McClanahan out, you got a chance to make a huge surge here like you did a year ago.
Yeah, you know, we're going to try not to think about it too much, but just try and go rounds and do the best we can. Whatever happens, happens. But, yeah, we're paying attention to that, and it didn't break my heart to see either one of them go out.
And now we turn our attention to funny car racing. The burnout process underway to heat the tires to provide optimum traction. Dean Scusa going against this man, Mark Oswald, and the crowd simply loves the burnouts. As far as points, John Force, having another dominant year after 8 of 19 events, has a huge lead over Al Hoffman. Bruce Pedregon is 3rd. Dean Scusa is 4th. And here's Scusa now backing into position. He qualified in the number 12 spot. Ran a 5:31 at 281 miles per hour. Then in the first round was able to eliminate Whit Bazemore, running a 5:35, 280 miles per hour to advance.
His opponent, Mark Oswald, at nobody's surprise, qualified number 4 quick, the 5:22, a 5:25 to beat Tony Pedregon in round number 1. The car in the near lane, Oswald, they don't run the entire series. They don't have that kind of funding. Hope to for 96, but they run enough races to stay very, very sharp. Bill Schultz, the crew chief on that machine.
And on the opposite lane, Lance Larson making similar decisions as Scusa inches into position alongside Oswald.
Same kind of horsepower you'll find on a top fuel dragster, but with the engine in front of the driver, a very short wheelbase. Takes real men and women to drive these things. Oswald was never in this one. Scusa, his quickest run of the weekend, and Lance Larson gets the attaboys. A 5:29 at 273 miles an hour. And Scusa, well, he'll get an attaboy himself as he left big time on Oswald. Stay with us. We've got lots more funny car racing to come.
We welcome you back to NHRA drag racing competition in the Oldsmobile Springnationals at Columbus, Ohio. Gary Gerald along with Steve Evans and Frank Hawley. We're in the second round of funny car competition. Right now, Steve is with Dean Scusa.
First round was nice, you know, but a 5:29 is much sweeter.
Oh, it sure is. Lance said he had to tune it up for these guys out here. They're running really good, especially Mark Oswald in an outboarder car. So we're just happy to go to the semis.
A lot of people like that near lane or left lane.
You know, I'm glad I'm not a crew chief, Steve, because I'd hate to have the decision to pick them today. But we're in the semis, and that's what it's all about.
So now we get ready for our next pair of the second round of funny car. Casey Spurlock in his Dodge Avenger in the near lane will meet Gary Clapshaw in his Ford Mustang on the far side of the track. Spurlock qualified 14th, but picked up in the first round when he eliminated Cruz Pedregon. Clapshaw qualified 11th, then struggled in the first round, but did manage to beat Jim Epler.
Gary Clapshaw won the Memphis race earlier this year, and he'll be the first to tell you he hit it with a lot of luck. He and his guys are running the entire national tour for the first time, and their prime motive is to have fun. And they are doing that. Spurlock in the near lane. As you said, a weak qualifying spot, only 14th, but Ronnie Swearingen has got it tuned up now. No games being played here. They'll move right in. Caught Spurlock napping at the starting line. Spurlock gets near the center. It is Clapshaw. Bit of an upset here. A 5.38 second elapsed time at only 278 miles an hour. The huge difference was off the starting line. Clapshaw could have won that one in a walk.
Meanwhile, John Force, the defending series champion, snuffed down inside that cockpit. Austin Coyle making preparation for a run against Gary Bolger. Let's check with Steve, who's now with Gary Clapshaw.
Gary, great driving and all that, but that may be the last win light you'll get with the 538.
Yeah, that's for sure. You know, we're struggling out here a little bit, and we're just getting lucky is basically what it is. I don't know, you know, when Lady Luck's with you, why, anything can happen.
Yeah, she helped you win one race already this year.
That's right. That's right.
Hoping that he can duplicate the success at Memphis, Clapshaw ponders his next opponent. Meanwhile, Gary Bolger getting ready for the burnout as he'll face John Force. Now, Force, of course, is one of the better finance teams on the tour. Earlier, I had a chance to talk with his veteran crew chief, Austin Coyle.
Sometimes you're always testing just a little bit, even on race day. It can really be a struggle.
Can you be a winner in this sport without that development?
Well, I don't believe so, because if you wait until it's already been proven, somebody else has beaten you with it.
And John Force, who has won 46 times in his career, wondering if this may be number 47 today. He is the #1 qualifier at this event with a new track record.
John Force's car is state-of-the-art 1995. Gary Bolger's car is state-of-the-art 1985. We've talked about all the information gathering. Well, Dale Creasy, that owns the Bolger car, does not have a computer of any type on that machine. He said, what good would it do? I'm computer illiterate. We do it like we did in the old days, by the seat of our pants.
And a remarkably fine job they have done considering those circumstances. But here is a David Goliath situation right now.
Oh, and Bolger almost tips it over. Gary, that was really close.
He did a tremendous job of saving that. An easy victory for Force. No impressive numbers with a 542 and 267 miles per hour. But look on the near side and watch the driving job done by Bolger in defeat as he saves this one. Losing traction coming at us, and he kept it out of the fence. Steve?
John, I don't know if you shut off or the car shut off, but that 42 is going to cost you lane choice, and I don't like that here.
Yeah, I don't know, a little dangerous. You know, it's funny about this whole business. I told Dixon earlier, I said, I think this is a game, a chance. I mean, it's all
wherever the cards are drawn. And, buddy, that was a case of pure luck there because we had a dead hole. She wouldn't run. The boy was driving away, and well, Hound Dog just had duck luck. She stood up and top.
There is nobody in motorsports that gives you a better post-race rundown than John Force. I think he's meaning they were flat lucky. This is Al Hoffman. We were on board with him briefly. We'll get a look from his cockpit in this round against Chuck Etchels. Hoffman qualified number 2 right behind Force. He eliminated Del Worsham in the first round.
And Chuck Etchels, really a tough racer from Connecticut, qualified number 7. His crew chief, Tim Richards, slowly but surely getting that car back towards the teens and possibly even the O's in the elapsed time department. And I've got to tell you, Al Hoffman was furious Saturday night. He had the $4,000 qualifying money in his pocket, and his arch rival John Force, last car down the racetrack, picked his pocket.
Tom Anderson, the crew chief for Al Hoffman, is in the process of building a new chassis now that they're hoping will give them better performance in the heat of summer.
We're doing it to try to help our consistency. Whether it will or not, we don't know, but we're constantly striving for that. That's how we lose out here. 90% of the time is by inconsistency, not because we get outpowered.
Power has certainly never been a problem for this team.
But the Chuck Etchels team has suffered from lack of consistency. He was number 1 qualifier at the previous race in Virginia and lost on a hole shot first round. His reaction time beat him. He was sick.
Etchels closest to the camera. Hoffman on the far side of the track.
Hoffman ahead at half track. Hoffman driving away. I don't know, Tom Anderson, if you want to park a car that'll run 5:15 in the heat of the day at 294 miles an hour, I think that one's a keeper.
So that sets the semifinals. Force against Scusa. The lane choice will go to Scusa, his 5:29, beating Force's 5:42. Clapshaw meets Hoffman. Hoffman has lane choice after that sizzling 5:15. Over in the top fuel pits, Buzzy Carter, crew chief for Eddie Hill, checking the head gasket as they get ready for their semifinal round here at Columbus. We've been watching the nitro-burning classes of Top Fuel and Funny Car. Now it's time for the gas-burning factory hot rods of Pro Stock. Here's Professor Evans.
Mr. Wizard back with another comparison of nitromethane and gasoline, this time for safety purposes using pure water. Now, going down the racetrack, a Pro Stock car, wide open throttle, will burn approximately 2 ounces of gasoline. The cost? Peanuts. A nitro car, going down the racetrack, full throttle, wide open, per second will burn 1 gallon of fuel in 1 second. $25 a gallon. Total cost for the run, $300 just for fuel. Canned dynamite is not cheap. Neither are these shoes that I just got all wet. Son of a gun.
The sacrifices that some broadcasters will make, but a point well taken. The burnout here, getting ready for a semifinal round in Pro Stock. Jim Yates on the far side. Yates is the season point leader, but only a 14-point margin over Warren Johnson, only 26 ahead of Darrell Alderman. The 14 is less than 1 round of action. His opponents in this semifinal matchup will be Steve Schmidt.
Nobody questions the horsepower in the Schmidt car because Steve makes it. He qualified number 3 at 7:16, ran at 7:18 in round 1 to beat Bruce Allen. Jim Yates, he's smiling. As Gary said, he has got the points lead. He qualified number 2 to WHA to 7:14. Now, this was earlier when Jim Yates raced Chuck Harris, and we told you these two cars have a team relationship. Harris dead late off the mark. Finally just says, hey, there's no hope here. Gives it to Yates at a 7:16, 191 miles an hour. That was earlier, and this is now. If Steve Schmidt has a weak link, it's been his driving.
Boy, Schmidt got in there quickly.
Brilliant reaction times from both drivers, the best of the day in any category. What appears to be a dead heat is actually won by Schmidt. They both ran 7.13 seconds. They both ran 192 miles an hour, and they were both wired to the Christmas tree.
That was an absolutely classic Pro Stock drag race. Everything identical virtually, from reaction time to elapsed time to top speed. Yates and Schmidt virtually side by side all the way down the track. And look at the margin of victory as they cross the stripe. No more than 3 feet separating the drivers. Let's go to Steve with Schmidt.
A pair of 713s tells me you must have moved first. Great job.
Well, I may have surprised him by staging first, but I just had a lot of confidence. My crew has done absolutely an incredible job. This old man's just along for the ride, having fun.
You didn't know you'd won, did you?
I wasn't sure. I thought that I held him off, but I wasn't sure.
Here he is right there. He wants to shake your hand before you get away.
Awesome job, Jim.
Congratulations.
Go get him now. All right.
So the season points leader, Yates, has been sidelined. That opens the door for this man, Warren Johnson. He qualified number 1 at 7:14, ran 7:14 to beat Mark Powick in the first round, then 7:13 to eliminate Frank Iaconio in round 2.
And his opponent, George Marnell, having the greatest weekend of his pro stock life, which is really not all that long. Qualified number 5 at a 7:16. Now, this was earlier. Marnell was in the far lane. Warren sent Kurt Johnson in the near lane. Marnell, who's a major masonry contractor in Las Vegas, may have gambled on the lights a bit. His reaction time was better even than Schmidt's we just showed you. A .415, almost perfect, even though he ran a 7:20 to Kurt Johnson's 7:19. George Marnell now takes on his second Johnson in a row. And this one may be a bit tougher.
Warren Johnson is coming off a victory in the last event at Richmond. He has 48 career wins.
Marnell again with the better light. But Johnson with a lot more power. The clock has struck midnight on the George Marnell Cinderella story, Gary.
And look at the time for WJ, a 7:10, and that will put him in the finals against Steve Schmidt. Johnson, with that 7:10, gets the lane choice against Schmidt's 7:13. So Warren Johnson in his Oldsmobile Cutlass, the two-time Pro Stock champion, in another final. He's with Steve.
I know you are never satisfied. That's what makes a great racer, but a 7:10 is pretty darn good.
It's going in the right direction. A 10 is pretty decent given the conditions, but the weather's getting a little bit better. Track will only hold so much, but we're satisfied with a win. That's what we're really satisfied with.
You got a different opponent in the final round here.
Well, I think they should give us a points lead, which is one thing, but we still have to win these races.
Steve Schmidt, he'll be tough. He's hungry.
The veteran driver from Georgia, Warren Johnson, advances, and we'll be back with more from the Oldsmobile Spring Nationals in Columbus in just a moment. We welcome you back to Columbus. Austin Coyle pointing John Force into the proper spot as he stages for a matchup here against Dean Scusa. The threat of rain is very real.
Dean Scusa has never defeated John Force. Force has taken him out to 2 finals. Scusa had the lane choice here, remember. They have both lost traction here with John Force as he dirt tracks his way down the pavement in Columbus. Unbelievable job of driving.
The master of the back pedal has struck again. Frank is with Austin Coyle.
Well, looks like the racetrack's a little wet if you ask me. It's been drizzling just a little bit, but Super Driver did it again.
Indeed, he did. And another interested observer of that pairing, Tom Anderson, who is now quickly making an adjustment of some sort to the power plant for Al Hoffman. Now let's go back and watch Scusa and Force as both lose traction almost immediately off the line. And then the backpedaling process is underway. Off the throttle, back on the throttle, off the throttle again, and then back on the power. And eventually it was Force who was able to stagger his way to a surprising victory. Just a masterful performance by Force. A feather-light touch on the throttle, getting the job done under most difficult circumstances.
Ain't nobody going to beat John Force in a pedaling contest, right, Johnny?
I don't know, down the kid, I never saw him. I never been in so much trouble. My old Pontiac, she was sideways this way, that way, back. Can't fix it, Coyle, do something. God, just, then it cleaned up. I still didn't see him. I thought he ran over the tower or something.
No wonder it didn't blow up.
It should have blown up. Don't care. It's got that great oil in it, that's why. I mean, it was center line guardrail. I thought it ain't coming around.
Oh, John Force. Years of experience paying off big time. So now the question becomes, will Force face Hoffman or Clapshaw? Let's check in with Steve, who's tracked down Dean Scusa.
Dean, you could see Force smoking the tires. You had to think sooner or later that thing was going to blow up and you'd get him.
Yeah, he was pedaling it. I mean, he's been doing this about as long as I've been alive, so he's the master at that. I tried to stay with him, but he was obviously out in front of me, and we're disappointed, obviously, too.
Well, there was a great opportunity for Scusa there to knock off the kingpin of Funny Car, but Force again prevailed. And now he'll face either Hoffman or Clapshaw. Hoffman on the far side of the track.
Clapshaw tried that deep stage. It didn't work on Al Hoffman. Oh, Tommy Anderson is going to look like a genius. 5:18 at 294. He's with Frank.
Well, I seen a guy spin the tires in front of us, so I retarded the mags 2 degrees and took a 0.5% of nitro out of it. Slowed down 300s, just perfect.
And perfection puts Hoffman in the finals against Force, and Hoffman has been a model of consistency. His 5:18 gives him lane choice over Force.
So far, Al, this has just been a day of back-breaking performance from this Firebird. A 5:18, never out of the teens.
Well, it was in trouble big time early. He started to shake, and I grabbed the brake real hard, and it slowed the car down. We probably lost a couple hundredths off that, but win lights, rounds, that's all we're happy about. And Tommy Anderson and my whole crew, them guys are incredible and stuff like this. The way they work and get this thing ready between rounds. My wife, Helen, she hasn't been feeling good, and she's really beating herself up out here. I hope we can win this one for her.
Any words for Force?
See you in the final, buddy.
And we look forward to it, and we'll be back with the semifinals of Top Fuel right after we take this time out. We welcome you back to the Oldsmobile Springnationals in Columbus. Semifinal round in Top Fuel. Tommy Johnson Jr. against this man, Eddie Hill. That'll be our first semifinal pairing.
Part of the chemical construction of nitromethane is oxygen in a liquid form. It brings air into the cylinder. That's why they burn such huge volumes of it. As I said earlier, a gallon a second under full power. And Eddie Hill's going to need full power here. Tommy Johnson Jr. having the best day of 1995.
And we'll be on board with Tommy Johnson Jr. getting the look from his cockpit, and here we go.
Tommy knew it was going to lose traction. He tried to pedal the car as John Force did. It was just a bit too late. Eddie Hill goes into his first final since the opening race of the year.
It's been a long time. We've been working hard, and we've had some things off on the car, the clutch and some of the fuel system. Now we're putting it back to the way we used to run the car, and the car's running good again.
And by virtue of the performance by Eddie Hill, look at this. Dick LaHaye, who calls the shots for Scott Coletta, has decided on a lane change, and he'll be going to the far lane. So a bit of strategy being played out as the rain threatens. Meanwhile, at the far end of the track, look at the emotion being shown by the 59-year-old Eddie Hill. The man who won the season opener at Pomona is back in the finals.
I think Eddie Hill found some fresh plutonium for the nuclear banana.
Oh, man, that sure felt good. I hadn't heard what it turned, but it felt much better than the first 2 rounds.
Well, it was smart. At 491, you didn't smoke the tires.
No, we didn't, and maybe there's a little left. We got lost for a while, and it looks like we're gradually finding our way back, and cross your fingers for the final.
Will do.
The oldest active driver in the NHRA. Getting ready for the finals, he'll face one of these men. Will it be Blaine Johnson? Will it be Scott Coletta?
You know, Dick LaHaye cannot look bad with this decision. Okay, if he smokes the tires and both lanes were bad, if he took the lane after seeing what happened to Johnson, then they'd say, why didn't you change? It's a no-lose deal for him. Blaine Johnson, near lane. Scott Coletta, defending Top Fuel champion, far side. Won this race a year ago. Johnson, Blaine, something went wrong with Johnson's car. His brother says, oh no, what do we have to do? Coletta was whipped, and I bet he knows it.
Blaine Johnson had himself a spot in the finals, and then suddenly, just yards short of the finish line, something went wrong. Let's take a look and replay. The lead coming off the line, clearly the near lane, and Blaine Johnson overpowering Coletta. But then at the 1,000-foot mark, you can see some smoke. The car shut down, and Coletta, by less than a car length, goes by. He'll go into the finals. It'll be a rematch from Pomona. Coletta against Hill, and Coletta has lane choice. Alan Johnson wondering what in the world went wrong. Well, unfortunately, the anticipated rains did in fact come and resulted in an overnight delay. The entire racing surface was soaked. Conditions are now much improved, but there's concern over a brand new racetrack. Earlier, Steve talked with Warren Johnson's crew chief, Greg Anderson.
Well, I'm a little scared myself right now. I think I'm going to go back and make a change. It took a little bit of damage from the rain, and I think I'd rather be safe right now.
Take a little clutch out of it? Or?
I think I'm going to change the gear and take some clutch out of it. Just go the safe route.
Well, they're about to find out whether the decisions made by Greg Anderson will pay off as Warren Johnson gets ready to stage for his final showdown here with the surprising Steve Schmidt.
Warren Johnson has won one race this season. Steve Schmidt, none. He can make amends for that right now. Look at Steve Schmidt. Another science fiction reaction time, and it is enough. Even though they both run 7:12 at 192, 193 miles an hour, it is Schmidt's 4.06 light that wins the race for him. An incredible display in 4 rounds today.
And you can see the advantage off the line. Keep in mind that Schmidt was only 0.06 of a second away from a disqualification with a red light. He gambled and he cut it as close as he possibly could. It results in only the second victory of his pro stock drag racing career. Steve?
You told me yesterday after the second round that your head was on straight, your driving was on top, you were going to win it. You did. Identical 712s.
Awesome. What else can I say? I want to thank, first of all, Dynagear. I couldn't be doing this without them, my family. Most of all, my crew chief, Mark Ingersoll. He was absolutely awesome this weekend. He never made a bad call. 8 passes.
Despite the fact that he lost in the finals, Warren Johnson is the leader of the pack, and Schmidt's victory now moves him into the top 10. He's in the number 8 position. Ready now for the funny car final showdown. This will be John Force going against perennial contender Al Hoffman.
The conditions are such, you might as well not even been here for Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. I asked Tom Anderson how he planned to deal with it in the Al Hoffman car final round.
We were running real good and real consistent yesterday, but the conditions have changed today. The track's going to be different. The air's different. Well, we got a tough competitor in the final with John Force, and it's just going to be a crapshoot today. Hopefully, it'll be in our favor.
A classic showdown between the top 2 qualifiers. Force, who's won already 5 times this year. Hoffman, who won at Houston, ready to go. And as Force loses traction, he can only sit helplessly and watch Hoffman drive away with an easy win. 5.12 and just a tick under 300 miles per hour. And Hoffman's consistency has finally paid off. Off the line, both drivers with nearly identical reaction time, but the thing to watch for is the loss of traction, and it comes almost immediately for John Force. Hoffman with his 8th career win. Now alongside Steve.
Al, you so richly deserve to win this race, and you have.
Well, I don't know what to say. We've been having problems, and it's starting to come around now, and my whole team, Tom Anderson, he called all the shots here this weekend. What a job he did.
John Force still has a giant lead, nearly 100 points. Hoffman now solidly second over Cruz Pedregon. And Hoffman delighted with the decisions made by Tom Anderson.
290.
Meanwhile, in the staging lanes, Fuzzy Carter watches and ponders. The top fuel finals are next. Back at Columbus, one final to go. It's in the top fuel category as Scott Coletta gets ready to meet up with Eddie Hill. Earlier, Steve talked with Dick LaHaye, chief for Coletta.
We have told you that Scott Coletta won this race exactly a year ago. What we need to do is show you how he won it. He was up against Joe Amato. He would ultimately win on a hole shot, a 495 to a quicker 494. But nearing the finish line, literally, all hell broke loose. Scott was just fine. The man we had to worry about was his crew chief, Dick LaHaye. That deal last year had a tremendous impact on you.
Yeah, I quit right after the run. When I found out he was okay, I said, that's it. I can't do this anymore. It's just too hard on my nerves.
I'm glad you changed your mind.
Well, so am I. Thank you.
High drama of a year ago, now forgotten as we're ready for the top fuel final. Coletta with the advantage. Coletta with the win. He has successfully defended his championship here at Columbus. Only the third driver to win back-to-back Top Fuel titles in the long history of the Spring Nationals. Starting line advantage, a slight one to Coletta on the far side of the track, and then he steadily pulled away. Remember, in their side-by-side run at Pomona in the finals, it was Hill who got the win. Today, it's all Scott Coletta.
Scott Coletta, you were the dominant driver all weekend. You deserved this.
Oh, boy, I tell you what, we needed it for sure. Our first win, and when it counts. Hopefully, we'll repeat like we did last year, start the roll.
And by virtue of the victory here at Columbus, Coletta has now pulled to within 45 points of the leader, Corey McLennan.